everybody, and welcome back to Common Club. My name's Katrina, and again, we are a show about mental health coming from people that suffer from mental health issues.
And I am Mel, and we call this lovely show Baggage Claim. I always get down to our entrance music, so I was a little off there. We're here every Tuesday at 8, and tonight we are talking about self-esteem. But before we go too far, we want to make sure that you guys understand that we are not mental health professionals. We are mental health patients talking about our experiences with mental health through the journey of life. And tonight we are going to talk about self-esteem and the self-help movement. Is that we're going to call it the movement? Because I think...
Yeah, let's call it a movement. I think so. We will also have this ticker at the bottom of the screen. If you ever feel triggered or feel like you need to reach out to somebody, please don't hesitate to do that. And before we start this show, I do want to say that we do love participation from our audience. We hope to have that tonight. And if you do ever want to join us, please let us know because we'd love to have you on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It would be. With that, let's just get into it. Let's talk about self-esteem and self-help.
Yeah. So No, you go first. Go.
No, go ahead.
Well, it was just interesting because we kind of jumped on this topic. We weren't sure. We bounced around with it, and then you went into it, and I love that you said you went into it and you were like, I don't know, this wasn't going to be a big deal, and you ended up finding out that this was something that was a big click hole for you. You ended up like absorbing a bunch and are kind of going to lead our discussion today because like it's your really awesome notes and your really awesome like articles, and Julia helped us pull some of those together. She needed a mental health day. She's good. She just needed, mental health.
She'll be back next week.
She'll be back. She's great. She just needed a night. And
yes.
We're going to go on with this little topic here. So.
Yeah, but I think that is such a good point, Mel. If you guys know me or if you don't, I'm one of those people that really will like say no to something right away before kind of thinking it out and talking about it. And I do that a lot in our group. Like I will say no to a lot of things, but then get shut down, which is good, right? That's what we want. So when we started this, talking about self-esteem and self-help, I was like, how can we make a whole show about that? Like I don't want to talk about myself the whole time, and that just seems weird anyway. And then I went down this rabbit hole of like the history of self-esteem, and it really like was eye-opening and something that I never had thought about, and how we'll get into it, but there's a psychological or a psychological, am I saying that right? No.
I know what you're saying psychological. Yes.
Side. Yeah, exactly. Side of side of self-esteem, and then there's kind of a hoity-toity type of.
There's the ego side. We call it
the what?
The ego side. We
there you
have
go.
Our sense of what our self is.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the history of it. I want to start like with before the 1960s. There was a big shift in self-esteem and self-help in the 60s, and it's interesting why. So really we'll start out with this guy named Samuel Smiles, and he had a book that came out in 1859 called Self-Help. This was really kind of the first full book, and if I'm wrong, please let me know, because I really try to go down the rabbit hole. Really a book about self-help, but what happened, in the mid 1800s to, let's say, 1960 is we had wars, and we had plagues, and we had a depression, and self-help kind of stopped being talked about or even discussed, because how could you look at it in a time when things were just what maybe seemed in disarray? But this really was going back into the 1800s in conjunction with like what Freud was doing and what other psychologists were kind of like having
the psychiatric
side of things. So they really did try to take that scientific approach. Again, it did take a back burner, but then we come to the 1960s. And the 1960s are interesting because what you have is a rise of consumerism and what a perfect family might be, or, there's prosperity in the world. So, in that time, self-help kind of came back into, I would say, like the popular culture of things. People started looking at their life and what that meant and how what being happy or fulfilled meant. Yeah, so that's just like really brief, really touch of like the water there. Do you have anything to add, Mel?
Yeah, you've got such a good handle on some of these things, and it's sort of that difference. You said it, like we had wars, we had depression, people didn't have a time, they were, and it talks about even at the beginning of the changeover in the 60s was when you get that prosperity, you get time to self-reflect. And when you have time to self-reflect, you start to talk about what does that mean and then when people are trying to sell you things in a new land and culture where people start to have money and economy starts to bounce back, how can they use that to help you influence yourself and what that means? And so, I mean, yeah, there's a weird, because in the 60s, that's when it really started to hit. The post-war America was going, but now we've got a situation where we can start to, do we want the Art Deco fruit bowl on our table? Because the guys next door have that, and it's all the thing. So.
Right, it's a little bit of like keeping up with the Joneses. Yes. I think we're going to talk about this more later, but how your job defines you and places value on self-worth. That all became really prevalent in the 1960s, which really kind of shocked me. And then you also have universities picking up studies on self-esteem and what is self-esteem in different environments and things like that. So then it really got funded, really, in a way.
There was a lot of psychoanalysis going on at that time because that was like a changeover in generations too, where those kids were starting to come of age and they were starting to have the ability to say, what are we? What do I want to wear?
Who do I want to be?
Yeah.
That's true.
It brings it to and that's where it goes. It's an individualism thing is where it starts. They start to take it out of the sort of social consciousness of that to who are you as an individual?
Exactly. But not an individual, but like I'm also going to look at you against other people as well.
Yeah.
Right. To have like that definition of like self-esteem. So there are,
So there was this guy in California. This is where it started to get interesting to me because, like, as the 60s roll around, some of these politicians, this is where it starts to what you're talking about, and it goes to what you're saying is it becomes politicians start to take it up. So this guy in California This guy in California decides to go to the mayor the governor of California and say, okay, now hear me out. If we make people feel better about themselves, they might do less crime and they might do more for their neighbors because
I love that
changing. And so I really, really want to try this. And the governor was like, a well-intentioned person in the post-rural America. We were starting to thrive, but no one knew exactly what we were. And there's a lot of new tech. And he's like, okay. And then that guy starts to do some work with it, but then starts to do the confirmation bias thing where he's looking for things to reinforce that it will reduce crime and that it will make people nicer to each other and it will do those. And he doesn't go do science. So you did have people doing science, but on the other side of it, you had these kinds of guys who were making it political.
Absolutely. What would it be if it weren't political, right? And then we kind of get into the origin of self-help literature. And this is where it becomes interesting to me. You really have a therapy way of looking at self-help. So that means like going to a therapist, talking to them, and you have a guru or this like spiritual awakening book that you read or person that you went to meet experience. So it really separates itself, right? And I really fast worked in sales, and like self-help books were pushed on you like candy, right? Like those were the things that were going to make you the best at what you do and number one. But your therapist probably is not going to look at it in that way.
Like I love how they do the crossover business self-help, kind of like the 1-minute manager type of BS, because that's like where they start to, because that's down the line, but yeah, it's like they start to do this thing, the cult thing, where they're like, hi, can I interest you in yourself?
Yeah, and that was really interesting as well. Post 1960s is the rise in spiritual guidance, gurus, self help people. Not just like the Tony Robbins of like what I would say today, but a more spiritual journey. Do you think that's true? Like that was really what was happening in the 60s
so,
compared to maybe
those
now?
kids,
Or do you think it's still happening?
well, I think it changes its stripes one of the things that even we got into right at the beginning is that when society reorients itself, a new form of this reorients itself around that. And you get into by the time you reach our time, we can talk about the mass media stuff at some point way later down the road here. But the idea is that it starts because, 60s and 70s, you get a lot more popular media too. So you get the Dr. Spock book, and you get that, like, literally every poor, unfortunate parent of a certain age probably shouldn't have been reading, but did. And that falls into a philosophy thing. And you get individuals, and then they sell it to you as philosophy or spiritualism, as opposed to, it's not science or therapy anymore. It's crystals and gurus and we'll get there, but
You can get down the weeds, yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I found that really interesting. There was this rise in, Eastern type of, not just like medicine, but like spiritual journey, like happening. Where the other end of it in like in school, in like university or at your therapist or psychologist, it's not going to look at it like that.
No, and they're rarely going to hand you some of those silly, no offense, authors out there, but some of the silly nonsense that some of these people hand you, and I just keep thinking about because you're absolutely right about the spiritual path people, and I think because those kids started to get into their 20s, late teens and 20s, and they had a really prosperous America. So they had a lot of time to self-reflect. So you went from their parents' generation, who didn't have a lot of time to self-reflect or, even consider why they were feeling what they were feeling. Whereas their kids come along, and their kids become like, look at me, look at this thing I am wearing, look at this sort of, and they almost become institutionalized as a generation with this.
Consumerism, materialism,
as value.
I want what you have. Yeah, as value.
As value, not as mental health, but as a value, like my house is prettier than yours, or I have one more plastic fruit in the fruit bowl than you. So
exactly, which is interesting because I think that can lead to another topic that we are going to touch on is like joblessness and self-esteem, or having a job and self-esteem. This was another one where article after article mentioned how people put their value on what they do. Not their family, not their health, but on what they do for a living and how much money they make.
Yeah, it's like a status symbol now. All of a sudden, it's like I have a sexier job than you, or car. I mean, I'm living in the Motor City. That was, they were built here, so it's a little bit different, but not because they were being. I mean, you start to get into these like, and they eventually use it for propaganda, but the idea is like, they start like, look at this cool guy in the sports car or the convertible, or
Right? It's like, it's that commercial mentality too of kind of what society became, and I think is changing. Right? We're not in front of a TV as much anymore, but the influence is still there somewhere. I mean, if it's YouTube or other streaming places. And I think what I meant with that is, your self esteem can just be
like your job.
like really impacted by almost anything these days.
Yeah, because now we have the opposite problem where it's easy to get caught up in all of the opposite things because it's like they're still saying this is how it's supposed to be, but that's not the reality on the ground, as it were. Is so they're still selling us the guy in the convertible, but that's not a thing anymore.
Well, yeah, and let's look at where we are now. So I think, we're going to come up to like almost 40 million people evicted, maybe more out of a job or probably out of a job already. What does that, how do they value themselves now with that being taken away? And I'm sure it's not well.
I saw something online recently. I do have a pretty good, cool, awesome social media community because I stay at a toxic space. And someone on our feed tweeted, I just got evicted and I'm homeless and I feel so ashamed of myself and I feel like a failure. And thank God that this is a safe, like, fun space because a lot of people just piled on that thread and said, you're not the failure. The system is the failure. But that is it right there. That goes to the heart of we've made ourselves around our homes and our cars and our jobs and our wealth and our things, all these things. And then when through no real fault of your own, the greater crisis is at hand, you're on the streets and you feel bad about yourself. Like what kind of when you get to self-help, you start to weave like self-help and the self-help movement. And so now you've got a situation where it can help you or it could really, really hurt you because when that's turned on you in a consumerist or however other else hyper political way, like when politicians start to get into these things and make it political, now you've got someone who just got evicted because of the crisis and losing their job and all these things that they have no control over and they feel ashamed.
Absolutely. And I think self-esteem, can lead to things like depression and suicidal thoughts and, things that, I get it, but it's just hard, right? You don't want people to get there and feel that way. Like what we're trying to do, and I think actually this leads into like what we're trying to do. We're part of, Common Club, and we're trying to bring people together to make a movement for the better, and really start protecting one another and not waiting or relying on the government to do it. And I think that relates a lot, for some reason, back to self-esteem because people are dealing with this right now and they're having low self-esteem. And, the ways that we'll get into in a minute, like there are some ways to help you with self-esteem, but they kind of seem unrealistic in times like these.
Yeah. And I know we've even discussed how it's affecting our self-esteem. And again, we're not going to make this about ourselves, but you look around at people in those situations, you understand, that you have mental health issues. There are other people out there. Again, the reason we're trying to do baggage claim in the first place, talk to people about, come tell them the real story about what we're dealing with so that they know that they're not alone out there with these feelings. And maybe like this can become a place where you here in Common Club can become a place, maybe hop in and hi, Tyson's speech impediment, by the way. Thank you. I meant to say hi. But this this makes me feel better. This helps my self-esteem because I feel like we've had people responding to this immediately, and that was the point of doing it. So when we do this and do a topic like this one, and we can kind of relate it to the larger picture, it is that we can't build our self-esteem on the old ways anymore, and all these things that we've sort of touched on and we'll get into a little more of and move forward on. But
Yeah.
we have this to work with. We know the history. We know how they started to use it. We know why, certain groups of people have that individualism. We can break the cycle now.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so.
Get started.
I think that's the goal. Like we need to get out of having. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of blanking, but what I'm feeling is we just like need to come together. Like self-esteem is so important, right? It really affects every day and like how you act and what you do. People with super high self-esteem are usually the ones that we look at as like role models, and that's hard. I mean, that can be difficult in itself. Yeah, I don't know.
I like where you're going with it though, because I think that if you're an empathetic person, you're somebody that's hanging out talking about your mental health because you want to help other people, then I mean, we see what happens when people who are, I mean, I think Robin Williams' name jumped up on the feed, and I don't want to, go into things that are too crazy, but the idea is that that's someone that everyone looks at and asks the questions of, that person looked like they had all the self-esteem in the world, and then ultimately it ends in a tragedy. And we don't want more tragedies. We want to help before tragedy strikes, and we want people to understand that all the different forms of mental illness are treatable, and the treatment is attainable if we work together on it. But that's
and with doctors, please, like,
yes, please
go to a doctor as well. But yeah, that's so true. The other, so here's I want to bring up an article.
Do it.
Give me 1 second.
I'm gonna do some reading music.
So this is 10 sources of low self-esteem, and this is just a little snippet and a picture, but I do have it over here that I can kind of go into.
Sweet. I also have it on my side. 10 sources of low.
Yeah, you can go ahead and get if you want it.
Okay, so the first one is that. All right. Nope, I'm looking at your snippet. Do you want me to do the 10 sources of low self-esteem? Because I've got being
No, I can't find the article. Sorry, guys. This is what we're figuring out live on air.
In the true form of live streaming and podcasting, we are doing it the best way we can. Well, the 10 sources of low self-esteem I have: be mindful, change the story, avoid the compare and despair. Yeah, these are good. Okay, so I'm going to go over.
I think those are the good ones, and I apologize. I'm going to stop my screen. We can go over those.
Sorry, your screen was small for me. I'm a dork. I've got the glasses on. It still doesn't help.
So what they're really saying is like be mindful. I think of like situations around you. I don't have like the longer text. Change the story. So change what you're thinking, your mentality, I think is one of them.
All right, here we go. Oh, here we go. How to raise your self-esteem. Well, one of them is get sober.
Oh, okay. So we're on that one. Okay, wait, hold on.
Am I in the wrong place entirely?
No, I was just talking, I think, about the good ones, but we can switch over.
Let's talk about the good ones. Okay, so being mindful.
We want to talk about the good ones. Yeah.
Do we want to get into being mindful, what that means, or we want to go to the next one?
Well, I was just saying, I think it's being mindful of, like, what's going on in your life, around you, things like that.
like we can look around right now and pretty much tell that there's millions of people out of work and there's millions of people out of houses. And it's like we can be mindful of the fact that our neighbors are pretty desperate, and so are we. I think, when I sit in here and I feel bad and I go, I wish I could, coming up, go to the festival and enjoy my friends who I only get to see once a year. And that's a really big part of my self-esteem. I don't get to do that this year because of the situation. It could be worse, though, because I could still talk to them online. But I try to remember that I have a home and I have all those things, and that it doesn't mean that we can't stop looking around. But I need to remember what I do have, and that's a great way of being mindful of my surroundings. And again, reminding ourselves that our neighbors are in the same situation as us. It's not their fault.
No. Did somebody say it was? I think I said change the story, and this is actually one of my favorites.
Okay.
I definitely have talked to my therapist about this many times. Just changing my thoughts, changing the story in my head, because what I'm creating is something negative always. It's not going to be positive. But changing that into a little bit of positivity of like, oh, I got something done, or I'm doing this at my job. Just that little tweak right there.
Okay, that's a good one because you will, it'll be the worst. It's worst case scenario. Change.
Yeah, I think it always is, and you just want to kind of
doom.
You want to avoid the compare and despair rabbit hole, and that is like in society today that sorry.
No, you're fine.
Saying it.
I'm sorry. That was my pause. I'm like drinking water here.
Dry. Can you look at will you look at Discord while I'm just talking about this? Check what somebody said. Avoid the compare and despair rabbit hole, and I think that's also a big one, especially in today's society. What do I have that what does this person have that I don't have? I think that's a huge one. I love that. That's why in the history of talking about this stuff and like researching it, 1960s, like consumerism is talked about a lot, and that's just the wants, right? Like I want what somebody else has, and I don't.
All right.
Okay, this one I hate, and my therapist has said it before many times, and they can say it many ways. You might have heard it differently, but it's channel your inner rock star. Oh. Have you had, I've actually had a therapist say something almost exactly like that.
I've never had one say that to me. If they do, I don't know what I would do to them. I do not.
But I think
violence, but I mean, that is like such, and that's when we were talking about gurus and stuff. The modern day equivalent of that, or the most recent equivalent to that, is something like a life coach. And that is exactly something that I picture some like middle-aged, no offense, Karen, sort of telling me to channel your inner rock star, honey. And it's like if somebody said that to me, I would be like, I am going to push your inner rock star right now for saying that.
Yeah. So I don't think that's relatable for everybody. It wasn't for me. But I know that there's like other sayings out there, and I think you've probably heard of some of them. I can't think of it right
more now. Yes, and I think that there's more constructive ways to say stuff like that. I don't think that tells you anything. There's a lot of ways to see a rock star. So what, I should channel like the guy that's like whoring after the party, or should I channel the guy that, or the gal that, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of rock stars, so maybe something a little more specific.
See, it's like for people that take it really literally, you just can't, you can't go there.
See?
I'm sorry, Mel. We can't go there.
I'm entirely up. My self-esteem is shattered.
This is one that I think your psychologist is going to tell you, your therapist is going to tell you, like everybody probably talks to you is going to tell you, and it's exercise. Like it's like if I hear exercise and yoga or meditation, I'm just like, ugh. But anyway, that I know it's good. It's very healthy for you. You definitely exercise. It's good. It's good. You just hear it a lot. You hear it a lot.
It should be applied. I think that it's some kinds of people who may enter your mental health journey will attempt to channel these things and these sayings and these whatever. And they sort of apply a blanket. It's like, it is what we talk about when we get into some of the CBT stuff, is they try to take something and blanket apply it to everybody's mental health, when that is, it sort of shows a little bit of a disconnection with what mental health is. So somebody who's proclaiming themselves to be a mental health expert in any way says something like that to me, I'm like, wow, you're painting with a pretty big paintbrush right now in a place where you should know that painting with such a broad stroke is not highly recommended because of the nature of mental health. If that
It's funny.
sense.
It's interesting though that I see a correlation between self-esteem and what we also are calling self-help in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which we are going to talk about on next week's show. So please come back and join us. But I see a correlation there.
Yeah, definitely. And
yeah,
it's that broad stroke. And I think what it is not the exercise or the yoga or something, because if that helps you, go for it. But
absolutely.
It's that assuming that, and I think even the people that like yoga are sick and tired of everyone just sort of throwing that out there as a therapy, because it's not for everyone.
No, and it's not.
That nobody wants.
Neither is meditation. I mean,
yeah,
that's that's actually like what I would call like one of the new. I know it's not new. Meditation's been around forever, but new.
They do it now.
New in the way that a therapist or a psychologist will talk to you about it, or even people and everybody is like talking about meditation these days. But it just doesn't work for everybody. Just FYI, and this is. The other one is do unto others. What do you think that means?
Well, I mean, that's essentially the golden rule thing. And how I feel about that is the best thing I can do is model the behavior that I would like to see in others. So if you're talking about the fact that like I go out and I open a door for someone whose arms are full of groceries, or I, talk to my neighbors or say hello, or can like give a zucchini bread to the next door neighbors from all the zucchini they've been giving us, just gifting to us. That's good. And that's a healthy relationship. And there's nothing really overly complicated about that. And so to me, that does contribute to my self-esteem, because when I am acting the way I would like my community to act, it makes me feel good. Not like I'm better than you, but it makes me feel good about going out into my community and not being a dick.
Absolutely.
So in that way, I'm all about that one.
And then there's two more, and I'll just do them really quickly. It's forgiveness, and that's really important. You need to be able to forgive and try to move on and be healthy and happy. And then remember that you are not your circumstances. And I think that is so important, especially right now. This isn't because of any, fault of your own. Whatever's happening in your life. I'm not saying everybody, but for most, it's not the fault of their own.
Because a lot of people can't access treatment, and they can't access, and again, like the homeless situation that we keep bringing it back to, because it's an important part, because our neighbors are going to be out there feeling terrible about themselves over something that just is not their fault. And we demonize people, and that doesn't help their self-esteem, and that doesn't help our community, and that starts the cycle.
Like the 10 things that we just listed, I don't think would help you right now if you had just been evicted or you just lost your job. I'm being honest. I don't. This is This is from a therapist, right? This is what your therapist and your psychologist are going to talk to you about, and I don't think that's helpful right now.
No, because it doesn't offer any solutions or answers. I think that, that almost is. It almost brings more despair. It's like, well, if the people that are supposed to be helping me about this are kind of giving me these answers, then. I mean, maybe it's time for us to start a new, like, what the thing started 75 years ago. It doesn't mean that it isn't still an evolving science. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's ever evolving, just so everybody knows. It was very hard to find any like kind of static research on this topic, but boys, there's some history to it, and for me, it's just really eye-opening, especially when you talk about jobs, because I think I definitely was one of those people that valued my self-worth on what I did, who I worked for. I'm from California, and like I think that was my status. That was my status thing. This is the company I'm going to work for, and it's going to be amazing. One thing that happened at a job that really changed my whole outlook was I had a boss, Blake. He'll never see this, but I love you, man. I would get like really worked up and like really, my self-esteem would be down at my job, just feeling like I'm not able to get things done. And he said, you know what, this job is not your life. Your family is your life. Your friends are your life. I never had anybody say that to me. And you know what, if he hadn't, I would still be going. But I had that one person say, you know what, this is not it. This is not everything. And that meant so much to me.
And you took that, though. You took that to heart. Somebody could say that to somebody and they could kind of let that roll off. You took that and you thought about that, and you did self-reflect, and you did realize what that person like they gave you their experience, and you went, oh my gosh, that's huge. And I think sometimes you just even need to, it's the duality of you believing and someone saying something to you that you never thought about. The aha moments we always talk about.
Yeah, but actually, now that I'm like thinking about it right now, if that would have been my coworker, I wouldn't have cared what they said. It wouldn't have mattered. But the fact that it was somebody with power made all the difference, which is really interesting to think about.
It's different. I think that's the difference between a boss and a leader. Lots of leaders are bosses, and lots of bosses are not leaders. But that's an empathetic person, because that human looked at another human and gave that person some very sage-like advice. It doesn't seem like it necessarily, but that was. And hopefully that trickles down, because someone could have never said that to you, but a person said it to you, you took it to heart, you just delivered that message maybe somebody out there is listening to. And like the things we're talking about that's where we're going to have to find our new self-esteem. So our society's reorienting again, just like they said, and socioeconomics and wars. It's pretty tough out there right now, and I don't want to get into like that kind of imagery, but the idea is this is real tough out there for everybody, and we don't have time to self-reflect because we're just trying to get along, and we don't know what the economics are even going to look like. And there's a lot of people trying to sell us, this is the economic picture. And I don't think many people are they're buying it, so that is affecting everybody's self-esteem and understanding. Did we want to go with, wait. Yes.
Yeah, there is a comment from Common Club. Thanks, Common Club.
Thanks, Common Club.
These are generic good advice pieces, but does any therapist have advice for people facing job loss, eviction, and homelessness? I wish that I had.
Me too.
To be honest, I wish we had a therapist on that would be able to talk about that. I haven't seen anything specifically related to those things.
That's a good question, though. I imagine if you're out there and you are a therapist or know any, actually, you know what? We have someone that we could probably talk to about a therapist. I'm going to track that down. We did have someone offered. They have friends that might be able to talk to us a little bit about that. So let me track that down, guys. I have a queue of. We've actually started getting a lot of responses from people about I might know this person, so I'm going to chase that down a little bit. We're going to have a friend of ours on coming up soon who's a mental health professional also. But we do, and if you're out there and you're listening right now, or somebody downloaded, we actually are turning this into a podcast. So it's commonclubtv.podbean.com. So if you know somebody and I don't watch those YouTube videos, be like, cool, I'll send you the podcast. It's the same exact thing without our beautiful faces, and maybe they'll tune in live if they want to later on. But that way, maybe if you have a therapist friend who really likes audio or has to commute or something right now, you're telecommuting, pass us on. Maybe they're
Check
interested.
us out.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to talk about how you can raise your self-esteem. I think that is really important. I think you can definitely raise your self-esteem. So let's talk about it. The first one that they have on here is Get Sober. This is not from a 12-step program, so I don't know why they have that on there. But
sobriety is a way to
drinking with a mental illness is not. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we know. Practice self-care, which I think is so important, but so hard for a lot of people, who suffer from self-esteem issues, depression, things like that.
I was just talking to some friends today, and they were talking about their struggle with that hump right now, to force yourself to, get the shower in or get the even simple stuff. But it's like, what am I doing it for? But also making sure to keep it.
Yeah. Something that I really try to do during these times to really just help my self-esteem is like try to have a little bit of a routine in the morning, right? Like I shower, get dressed, and go to the computer, or I'll do something on my phone, like that kind of thing. And it does help a little bit.
I like to do the coffee and the dogs and the whole thing.
The coffee.
Exactly. Sorry, you're lagging a little bit. It's my fault. I don't mean to jump over you.
No. I would so a self-defeating action is just something, it's an interfering negative thought, basically.
All right.
And
sorry,
then you have...
I just caught up with you.
You behind, sorry.
No, we were lagging out there because the internet is always so awesome when we try to do this every Tuesday night.
And then it's slow down, personalizing. I can't talk today.
That's okay.
And that is target personalizing to slow impulsive responses. You can begin to interfere with these automatic overreactions by using relaxation and stress management techniques. Of course, relaxation and stress management techniques. Stop and take notice. Pay attention to the familiarity of like an impulse that's happening. Acknowledge reaction. So verbalize like that you're doing something.
I do this one.
You don't want to be doing. Do you do that one?
I do this one a lot. I will literally sometimes, because I'll get to just completely going crazy, and I'll just stop myself and be like, okay, stop. I've done this where I've said, okay, stop. And I will just say it out loud, and it helps me to just that will put me back in the moment and calm me down. And because then I sort of have a conversation with myself about like, is this legitimate? Or are you having all the things that go on with you that are just going to make this worse? So I do that. I mean, I do talk out loud. I mean, I think that it's helpful. I talk all the time on the air.
You do.
It's wonderful.
It is.
The hope is that someone's listening somewhere, and most people aren't. So it works perfectly.
I think this one is really good, and it's accept impulse. Be able to state the benefit of overreacting. Don't think that you're wrong or it's bad. If it is, okay. But, like, don't, just accept it. I like that one.
Yeah, because a lot of people are just like, get over it. No, feel the thing. Don't get over it. identify it, feel it, and I mean, I know that's kind of in the next couple as well, but like,
Yeah.
we have feelings. It's okay. We're allowed to. It's everything else. Because if we're honest about the start, then we don't get into the crazy cycle, like where you start to go where you don't want to go. So,
Yeah.
Next one.
So develop skills, and these skills are life skills, basically. Experience feelings. Feel feelings in your body and identify your needs. One thing I love to do is sensory. Is it called like sensory?
The sensory deprivation one, or
Where you think about your body and what body you're touching or thinking. What's that called?
I can't remember what it's called, but I do know what you're talking about, because I had a professor kind of teaches about it, where you feel your feet in your socks, and
so it just gives you like you feel your whole body. I actually should be doing that more when I'm anxious. Actually, good. I'm glad I thought of that.
See, this was good for you.
I came up on that exactly.
That's why this is good to do. It's a reminder for us too.
Absolutely. Optional thinking and either or thinking. Either or
thinking, yeah.
And either or
this
thinking.
Is either I'm gonna do this, or either I'm not gonna eat today, or I'm gonna starve myself. I don't know. That's not it. Those are the same thing.
Not a good example, but that's
Terrible example. But yes, I do. It's extreme either or. It's like, okay, I'm not going to keep trying to explain.
No, I got you. I think I get it. So detachment and all abuse. Say no to misrepresentations and assumptions by maintaining personal boundaries. So,
personal
boundaries, very important.
Super important.
Assertion. Voice what you see, feel, want by making I statements. Expressing our thoughts, feelings, and desires in a direct and honest manner, we show that we are in charge of our lives.
Do you struggle that one at all? Do you have
And then receptivity.
I do and don't. I sometimes. Yeah, tell me, do you struggle with any of those two? No, the last one you probably don't.
Yeah, I'm never on it. I'm never honest about me. I mean, I am, but I'm not. Right? I try to hide my feelings as long as I can hide them.
So you don't so assertion, so voice what you see, feel, and want by making I statements. Do you find that difficult? I find it difficult. That's why.
I see. Yes.
I'm curious because that one, it seems like it should be easy because I feel like I have my own agency, but also a lot of times where I should be saying, I feel like this is happening, I don't. And then I go to the other things before that.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if you felt that way, or if you're because some people are better at some of these things than others too. Like all these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Receptivity and self-absorption. Listen to others' words and meanings to state them. In this way, we act with awareness of our contribution to events as well as empathize with the needs of others.
I like that idea. I could probably be better at that one.
These are very textbook. I feel they're so textbook.
Yeah, they really are, though. I mean,
I feel like I just came out of my therapist's office.
I just left my Psych 102 class because I have to have that. Yeah, we definitely need to get someone who can talk to us about these things in a more broad sense. I'd be curious I bet you there's now I can't say the word. I bet there are psychiatrists and psychoanalysts and therapists out there who are as annoyed with this stuff being out there as we are. Because it's got to make it tough on them if they're trying to give constructive things.
Advice, yeah.
And then there's a lot of pseudoscience. I mean, I think that the crux of some of the reasons that we were struggling with this is that, from the beginning, once the politics kind of swept in, this kind of became more pseudoscience than anything because it was trying to reinforce its own bias. It was doing anti-science. Science is supposed to it's here's my theory, here's my evidence. I'm not trying to prove that my theory is right. I'm trying to see if my theory is right or potentially
Well,
wrong.
that's a freaking great point, because the whole point of all this is like we're always changing. This is always changing. This is not stagnant. It hasn't been stagnant. Self-esteem, self-help will always be moving forward.
Reorienting with the
Changing,
society.
yeah.
And our society changes faster than ever. I mean,
Exactly.
we change with phone updates these days. Like,
Yeah.
that's fast.
Yeah, I mean, so I think these were some good, advice. It was some good advice on how to raise your self-esteem. I would say it's too textbook for me. It's too, I came out of my therapist's office. Unfortunately, I wish we had others, but, I think we try to talk about what we do to help. I'd love to hear what other people do to help themselves. And, see how that's going.
We've got Tyson's in here saying, typically hide true feelings until I blow up. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm not too ashamed to admit that I do that more than I'd like to admit. I think that's a very human reaction to that. And then, of course, you don't feel so great about yourself once you've done that either, especially if you do it to somebody that you love, which is almost inevitable. And then you're like, wow, now I feel like an asshole and I'm an asshole. So
yeah, it's true.
Whereas if you did, I mean, some of these textbook things as they are, and I'm with you, I struggle with the lecturing out of a book style of things. But at the same time, it's like, trying some of the, if you're struggling, kind of going back to a list and being like, I need to assert myself to myself even and be like, hey, don't be a jerk. So it makes you feel bad. It makes the person next to you feel bad. Try not to be a jerk.
I want to bring up this theory that I just learned about today, which is crazy. Yeah. I wish I would have known about it before. But it is the actor network theory. And basically, it's an attempt to provide analytical tools for explaining the very processes by which society is constantly reconfiguring, which is so true. And this is kind of how they study self-esteem as well. Good. Because you're not always constant, right? Things are always moving and changing. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting.
I did too.
There were a bunch of papers using it to talk about self-esteem and self-help, and that's how I kind of stumbled upon it. I need to do some more research, and if anybody knows anything about it, let me know.
It seems more in touch with it takes sort of the like commercialism and the like, making self around something that isn't real, and it makes it about your agency. Like you have a stake in your self-esteem that you can assert. I mean, that you can claim and say, hey, I'm going to make myself feel better, not by hurting someone or doing something silly, but actually by saying, like, I'm not going to feel this way, or I'm not going to let something else make me feel this way. It's easier said than done. I mean, it sounds all great.
Oh my God, yeah. It sounds great.
I mean,
until you
it'd
try
be
to
wonderful
do it.
if I could just, I mean, there you go, everyone. If you can accomplish that, call us up right
finished.
now.
We're done.
Done. We don't ever have to do another show. You can come on here and do a success story. But I do think that we do have to, I mean, even like telling the person, like, the system is failing you. It's not you. The system is failing you. I think that helps give a person agency. Or the person that said to you, this job isn't you, it's not your life. Your family is your life. Your thing. That gave you some agency. That made you go, wait a minute, I can claim this thing back for myself. And then you're
100%. But I had to get it felt like I had to get permission to do that. And I don't think people need to look for permission to live their life, right? And life should be about. It started you on
a track. It started you down a path. So
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, I'm very thankful. Like, changing my life. No kidding.
Yeah, no, that's sometimes it's so funny when someone just gives you a doink upside the head, but then you have to act on it too. I mean, I think you should give yourself a little bit of credit that you acted on it, because I think
I honestly no, I did not act on it. I didn't. I was very serious about that job, But it definitely made me pause and freaking think, right? Like, why is he saying that? What does that mean? So much of our self-worth is defined by what we freaking do, and it shouldn't be, because that's not that doesn't define you as a person.
No, and even if you like your job and you want these things in your life, that's not all you are. You know, I'm not any one thing. Certainly not my mental illness. So, yeah.
Agreed. Well, I think we're going to end it for the night. Thank you guys for coming to... Unless you have any last thoughts.
No, I don't. I just want to thank people that... I'm looking over here because I see that we do have a few commenters, and I do like to thank you guys for hanging out and appreciate the fact that
thank you guys so much.
Get some consistent folks in here. We get some new friends in here. It's nice.
It is nice. I hope this was a little bit enlightening and helped a little. That's all we can hope for. So we are Baggage Claim. We'll be back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next
Bye,
time.
guys.
Check out the podcast. Comic Club Pod. Never mind. I did it wrong. Good night, everyone. We love you for joining us.
Good night.